got Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland once again being incredibly ignorant about the cost of living, saying that the economy isn't suffering, and if you're feeling like it is, it's just the vibes, bro. Suggesting that we're not in a recession, but rather a vibe session. Yeah, guys, don't worry. The economy's fucking great. You all just have bad vibes. Late on bills? Bad vibes. Struggling to pay rent? Yeah, chill on that. The vibes are off. Can't afford to feed your kids? Vibe check. You're killing my mood, bro. And honestly, the Deputy Prime Minister citing vibes to argue that people aren't actually poor, they just feel poor because they have no money, would be hilarious if it weren't so severely deranged and insulting. I honestly didn't think she could top implying that people would be less poor if they just canceled their Disney Plus subscription, but here we are. Like, you'll be less poor if you just stop having poor vibes. What are we doing? But Chrystia's take on this actually gets worse, if you can believe that. Not only is the economy good and all the negative energy, bad vibes people just need to recognize that, but their bad vibes, if gone unchecked, will actually ruin the good economy. You know what? I changed my mind. I'm on board. I now realize that we can manifest a good economy by channeling positive economic vibes into the atmosphere. I'm currently aligning my stop being poor chakras by rubbing economy crystals. Quick, everybody start meditating and we can all collectively astral project to a dimension where I can afford butter. Setting aside that this is the economic policy equivalent of making a vision board, Chrystia Freeland is right that economists are actually talking about the vibe session, a term that she probably single-handedly just ruined, albeit in a way that diametrically opposes how it's being talked about here. Even the economist who coined the term vibe session, Kyla Scanlon, basically said Chrystia is using it incorrectly, in the kindest way possible, but yeah.
I don't know if the word was used in the context that I would use it. I think when you just say, hey everybody, just feel a little bit better, it'll be okay, it just doesn't work.
So how is Kyla using the term?
And the vibe session is this idea that there's a temporary decline in sentiment despite the economic data feeling relatively okay.
I think the economic data isn't always telling the full story, and there's kind of these structural problems where people are like, okay, you know, the economy's saying one thing, but like I can't afford a home and like my food's really expensive, like the data's good but I don't feel good. And that's kind of the idea of the vibe session. I think the vibe session is a useful tool because like we really do need to figure out the data situation, like what economic data points are actually going to tell a story that can align with sentiment. Like something is just totally off balance.
Yeah, so a stark difference between Chrystia's assessment that people have bad vibes even though they should have good vibes because economic data, which honestly just feels pretty invalidating, and Kyla's assessment that there's something inherently wrong with the economic data. Namely that it doesn't actually represent what's happening in people's day-to-day lives. And there's a reason for that. And that's that the economic data that the government collects doesn't actually measure economic pressures that people are facing in their day-to-day lives. Let's start by covering what a recession actually is. According to TD Bank, the most basic definition of a recession is 2 consecutive quarters where the economy contracts, which usually equates to a reduction in gross domestic product, GDP. So basically, if GDP goes down for 2 consecutive 3-month periods, it's a recession. And GDP, which measures the total market value of all goods produced in a country, includes wages, rents, interests, and here's where it gets tricky, profits. Meaning if corporate profit takes a larger share of GDP than wages, which we know it is because while wages remain stagnant, seemingly every corporate entity in every industry is constantly posting record profits, then the GDP can still continue to rise. Meaning we wouldn't be in a recession, but that wouldn't stop everyone from still being poor as fuck, meaning we're in a vibe session. So the vibe session, at least according to Chrystia Freeland, is when a bunch of selfish poors aren't celebrating the fact that Galen Weston Jr. made a fuck ton of extra money this year. So Chrystia is either so out of touch that she doesn't understand what the economic measurements even mean for Canadians, or she's using these numbers to gaslight people. Utilizing a term, by the way, which had an original intent of validating struggling individuals and bridging the gap between economic measurements and the actual cost of living. When it comes to housing even, the abysmal state of the housing market, on paper, actually looks good for the economy. Like when a family buys an insanely overinflated home for $1 million, that's $1 million being injected into the economy and increasing the GDP. And Chrystia Freeland's like, hey, why are you so mad about paying $1 million for a fucking apartment when that's good for the economy? That's bad vibes. Chrystia, your vibes are so bad that they've brought me from a vibe session to a crippling vibepression. But don't worry, because the government has a solution for these bad vibes totally killing their buzz. Temporarily removing GST on select items, including restaurant meals, takeout, and booze. That's right, the sitting government's solution to bad vibes is the exact same solution a frat bro would come up with at the worst party you've ever been to. Whoa, these vibes are off. Let's order pizza and get drunk as fuck. And maybe I'm being too hard on Chrystia. Perhaps my vibes are bad. Sorry about that. I guess doing something is better than doing nothing. But branding the temporary GST holiday, which frankly won't do much anyway, as simply a way to make people feel better and continuing to frame the economy as spectacular, is a huge mistake for the Liberals. And it's not much different than the shit Democrats were saying about the American economy, an economy the term Vibecession was coined to describe, before losing bigly to the Republicans. Here's the creator of the term Vibecession, Kyla Scanlon, discussing the mistakes of the Harris campaign as far as not taking people's financial realities seriously.
In that election, Joe Biden's campaign tended to say that his economy was doing great, that the media were telling people bad news. What do you think he risked by not taking the Vibecession seriously?
He risked the entire election. He lost. Harris lost.
You think that's why he lost?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think this was an election that was dominated by media, and it was an election that was dominated by economics. You know, there has been this kind of like, oh, everybody should be feeling good about the economy. Like, look at all the manufacturing spend, the CHIPS Act, the IRA, the IIJA, and like those are great, but like that's manufacturing dollars. That's not necessarily, the average person isn't always going to be feeling that.
And it seems like the Liberals have not learned anything from the mistakes of their American counterparts. Because here's Chrystia Freeland doing the exact same thing. Oh yeah, the economy's great. Look at these numbers. Fuck the numbers. The numbers don't reflect what's really happening as far as affordability, which is what people care about. We don't care how much oil companies made last quarter. We care how the economy is affecting us. And it's affecting us badly, regardless of the numbers, which is what Vibecession is supposed to mean. And by turning it around on Canadians, the ones experiencing it, who on average make 20% of what Chrystia Freeland does, and basically saying, nah, you guys are wrong, vibes are bad, administer a vibe check or you'll make the economy worse. It alienates Canadians, just like the Democrats alienated Americans in the United States and sent them to the Republican Party. The same thing is happening here. People are turning to the Conservatives for the sole fact that the Liberals seem out of touch as fuck. And they don't realize or care that conservative policies are even worse for the cost of living. That Pierre Poilievre is objectively bad for workers, that he didn't even want to give people COVID relief, or that his proposed tax cuts benefit only the wealthiest Canadians. And yeah, the Conservatives are obviously in a better position to talk about how bad things suck under the current government. Like, if the current government did the same thing, they'd basically just be talking shit about themselves. But to ignore the situation completely and suggest everyone else does the same because we can just manifest a good economy via positive vibes is fucking insane. Gaslighting voters? Not the vibe if you don't want your party to implode next election. Forget the Vibecession, keep it up, and it's about to be a Vibejority conservative government, which is going to be very bad vibes. It's going to be a vibesaster, actually.
All right, thanks for watching. If you don't already, please consider supporting my Patreon at patreon.com/CallumXOXOX. And if you do, thank you so much. You're the best. So if you see your name flashing across the screen, or if it's about to flash across the screen, just know that your support hugely helps me in continuing to make these videos, whether you're an active supporter or just taking a little break or have decided just you're done with it. Whatever the case may be, thank you so much. Huge help. And yeah, till next time.